Hi, everybody. Mitch Tannenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today for this week's Security News Update. Lead story is DeepSeek, that now famous Chinese competitor to ChatGPT, has been discovered to send data unencrypted. And now this is in particular for the iOS version, the Apple version. It says that the researchers have looked at it because it's not encrypted, so anybody can look at it. The app collects extensive user data and device data, and in those rare cases where it does use encryption, the encryption is 3DES, which is a 20-year-old algorithm, something like that. It was retired at least 10 years ago, and it uses a hard-coded key. So those two things together basically says there really is no encryption, even though there is technically some encryption. And then Apple has this platform-wide encryption security called App Transport Security. They disable it for some reason. Apple allows them to disable it for some reason, which is even weirder. So anyway, bottom line here is, if you're thinking about using DeepSeek for any kind of data that you care about, don't. There's been this raft of cable cuts, undersea cable cuts in the Baltic area. Sweden went off and commandeered a ship, a couple of weeks ago now, that cut a cable. They now think that this particular attack was not sabotage, but they are saying it's caused by a combination of incompetence and weather. Finland, on the other hand, which also commandeered a ship, the Eagle S, does not think that damage was accidental, so who the hell knows what all it is, but suffices to say, people are on edge. ZyXEL, who makes low-cost routers that are typically used at home and often used by internet providers because they don't want to spend more than $5 on a router, they're saying they're not going to go patch some end-of-life routers that are probably still millions of them in use. And the flaws are known and they're being exploited. Bottom line is, if you care about your home network, and that's where we'd find these, and there's a story later on about Netgear, if you care about your home network, you just need to install your own firewall. Now, for businesses that allow people to work from home, you can't force that issue, of course, and you probably don't even know what your employees are using. So the best you can do is harden your systems that are going to be used at home. And if you're allowing people to use their own systems at home, well, that's an even bigger problem. So if you need help kind of sorting all this out, let us know. In the CMMC Q&A department, a couple of interesting things. Probably the most interesting thing this week is something called Standard Form XXX. Now, this has nothing to do with adult content. The DoD has been working for 5 years now trying to get protections for controlled unclassified information. Finally, the rest of the government is getting started at keeping up with that. And in the new draft regulation covering that, there is a standard form with a placeholder number, which will have a number once it's released. But right now, the placeholder number is XXX. And it is a great document. It's probably the single best thing that's in this whole regulation, and it's like 14 pages long, and it has the detailed information of what is CUI and how you have to protect it and what kind of training you have to have and all that stuff. And boy, it would have been great if DoD had released that. And I don't know whether DoD is going to go off and grab this and implement it before the whole FAR CUI goes into effect, but we'll see. Hopefully they will. CISA has released help for protecting against active shooters. Now, hopefully, everybody hopes that it's not going to happen to them. Unfortunately, the news kind of indicates that may not be the case. So they've got planning documents and a template for an emergency operations plan and training. So if this is something that's in your purview, CISA has provided some free help. In the patches department, and this affects anybody that has an AMD-based computer as opposed to an Intel-based computer. They patched a microcode bug that ASUS, who is one of their vendors, let out of the bag weeks ago. We'll see whether this patch actually holds up. Not clear, because oftentimes these patches are band-aids, and the researchers say, yeah, it's a nice band-aid, but it doesn't really solve the problem. And of course, expect to find false patches, fake patches, which are really malware. But you need to patch. Not patching is not a great idea. You need to figure out which machines need to patch. There'll be different patches for different models of computers because each one of them has different firmware. And then you got to hope that the thing actually works. Speaking of patches, Russia is exploiting a bug in 7-zip, the very popular open source encryption compression software. And, they're using it to load malware. No big surprise there. I checked 3 different machines just to kind of get the sense of what's going on. All 3 machines had old, obsolete versions of 7-zip. And they're all different versions, which is also kind of interesting. But if you use 7-zip or have it installed, definitely it's time to patch. Netgear is urging consumers to patch their Wi-Fi routers. Now, unlike the ZyXEL deal earlier in the story, this one is not some old, obsolete piece of hardware. This is, first of all, the whole family of routers, Wi-Fi access points, including their Nighthawk Pro gaming router. So the bug allows for unauthenticated attacks and remote code execution, so not good. And so if you're using Netgear stuff, time to patch. Following on in the tradition of TikTok, House lawmakers are trying to ban DeepSeek. We'll see where that goes. Texas did that through an executive order. In the case of Texas, it only applies to government computers and government phones, but expect this to spread. In the education department, this is great. So there's a scam called rug pulling, in the crypto token world. What that means basically is somebody creates a crypto token, they create fake buzz around it to jack up the price, and then they sell all of the tokens that they have, make a fortune, and everybody else gets screwed. Well, there's a tool that some of these hackers use, not hackers, well, they are hackers, and crypto crooks, I guess I'd call them, use to facilitate this, called dog whiff tools. But apparently the tool doesn't have any security in it, so a different group of hackers thought it would be entertaining to hack the hacker, so to speak, and they modified the software to add a backdoor, allowing them to steal millions of dollars in tokens from the other crooks. I'm not too sad for them. As they say, karma is a bitch. Coinbase is accused of allowing more than $300 million in cyber attacks against customers. These are social engineering attacks. And the researcher who figured this out identified $65 million of crypto thefts in just 2 months. This is about $30 million a month. That translates to about almost $400 million a year. But a lot of the data is not publicly available, so that $400 million a year is probably a lowball estimate of how much is really getting stolen. Hey, Google AI, create me some malware, please. Apparently, Google has said that in just the past year, dozens of hacking groups in dozens of countries have been detected and clobbered by Google using AI's agent Gemini to write malware and also to look for vulnerabilities and to target organizations for attack. That's not a big surprise, and it's not limited to Google. Google's just being upfront about it. But AI is good for lots of things, and some of those things are malicious. Sorry about that. The number 4 might be the randomest number around. Google researchers have figured out how to break AMD's processor security. This is not a good week for AMD. The next week it'll be Google, so whatever. And what that allows them to do is to install firmware of their choosing into the processor. And as a proof of concept, they demonstrated that by doing this, they could go off and get the random number instruction, read random, to return the number 4 every time it was called, which is honestly not terribly random. So I'm sure AMD will try to fix this. And then we have the same situation we were talking about a minute ago, which is how do we make sure you're not getting a malicious patch, and how do you make sure that it's the right patch for the right computer, and yada, 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 all that stuff. Random number generators are really critical for a lot of things, but one of the key things that they're critical for is encryption. So, anything that you want private, like your banking data or anything else, the fact that the computer could be hacked and making random number makes it trivial for the bad guys to compromise the encryption. There's a lawsuit which is pending against the city of Norfolk, Virginia. They have deployed 172 license plate readers in the city, along with another 65 being planned. And the police chief said, well, this is really cool because there's no place you can hide in the city. Well, the First Amendment, or the Fourth Amendment rather, kind of makes that problematic. And the judge has said that, well, maybe there's some merit to this. The Supreme Court has talked about this, and actually in a conceptually similar suit, the Supreme Court recently ruled against the city, in this case it was New York, for doing kind of very similar things, which is persistent surveillance. So we'll see what happens with this case, but not, I'm sure, what the folks in Norfolk, the cops in Norfolk, were hoping for. And this week's news bites, this has been all over the news, so this is probably old news for you. Musk's aides with no government experience, no cybersecurity experience, one of them just out of high school, are playing a key role at OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, the organization that is the government's HR department. What could possibly go wrong? Chinese crooks have figured out how to install a backdoor in network devices. This was announced by Fortinet. They're not saying how the backdoors got in there. I don't know whether that's because they don't know or because they don't have a fix. I'm hoping it's the second. So hopefully they will tell us what's going on. But obviously this allows them to compromise the network devices, which, firewalls basically, and therefore compromise your network. SolarWinds, and they, as you well know, have been the butt of too many wrong jokes after their massive compromise that compromised all kinds of government networks in 2020, was bought by a PE firm, private equity firm, for $4+ billion. And we know what private equity firms do, which is, they figure out ways to cut costs so that they can sell the company in a couple of years and make a fortune. For people that are using the SolarWinds software, that's probably not going to be a terribly appealing strategy. But you've got a combination of large companies like Amazon and Walmart that use it, and then you got a bucket load of small companies. Well, for companies like Amazon and Walmart, it's going to be harder to change. For smaller companies, yeah, you could change it. When the contract's up, you just go out and replace it with something else. So I'm sure they're going to see some runoff. But if you use the SolarWinds software, you probably ought to watch closely what's going on and see whether or not whatever changes they're making are going to have a negative impact on you. For Apple users, the UK Home Office managed to get a law passed by Parliament a couple of years ago, starting in 2016, one law, in 2019, another law, which is unaffectionately referred to as the Snoopers Charter. It allows them to force a company to install backdoors in their software so they can snoop on whatever they want. Well, in this case, and they're not talking about it, but the word's getting out, which is, in some sense, scary all by itself, because, the whole idea of the backdoor, in some senses, it really got to be pretty secret in order for it to not be compromised. And if it's the news that it's already out, then that's not a very good indicator for not being compromisable. But anyway, it requires them to eavesdrop on Apple devices, likely worldwide. And Apple, the law prohibits Apple from talking about it on top of everything else. So what we got is a bunch of leaks, which, probably works just as well. Apple can then claim plausible deniability. Who knows? Maybe Apple's the one that's doing the leaks. But we don't know the extent, the scope. We will discover whether Apple as any principals anymore, or whether they're just going wherever the money is. We know that they sold out in China, so probably a sell in the UK as well. Just bye encryption. I mean, one option would be to eliminate encrypted backups, which is what this is targeting. And then at least as a Apple user, you know what you got. No encryption. We can read whatever you got. So can anybody else. So if that's what it turns out to be, then that's fine, and everybody knows what's going on. But in the meantime, we got a lot of uncertainty. So stay tuned for that one. I'm sure we will find out. If any of these things that we talked about today we can help you with, please let us know. And until next time, stay safe.